My grandmother used to say, kindness is the only language everyone understands. Emerald Castellanos whispered these words to herself as she wiped down the marble reception desk at the Grand Meridian Hotel, her cloth moving in slow, deliberate circles. At 25, she'd learned that invisible people heard the most, the dismissive laughs, the careless remarks, the way guests looked through her as if she were simply part of the furniture. But her grandmother's voice, warm as summer honey, still lived inside her heart, reminding her that every person carried a story worth honoring. The evening reception was already humming with energy. Crystal glasses clinked beneath chandeliers that scattered light like scattered diamonds. Business executives in tailored suits moved through the crowd with the confidence of those who'd never questioned their place in any room. This was a gathering of tech moguls and venture capitalists, people who measured worth in stock prices and quarterly reports. Near the entrance stood Rashid al-Zarani, his traditional white thobe and gutra marking him as different in a sea of dark suits. At 58, he'd built an empire in renewable energy that stretched across 3 continents, yet tonight he stood alone, his presence acknowledged with polite nods that never quite became conversations. He'd grown accustomed to this, the subtle distance, the assumptions people made before they knew his name. "Excuse me, is there somewhere I could get some water?" Rashid asked a passing executive. The man barely paused. "Staff will bring refreshments around." He moved on without making eye contact. Rashid had experienced this particular isolation in Western business circles before, the way doors closed politely, how conversations redirected. He told himself it didn't matter. He'd come to discuss a partnership with Meridian Technologies, not to make friends. But there was something especially sharp about being ignored in a room full of people allegedly gathered for connection. From her position at the reception desk, Emerald noticed. She noticed everything. It was the survival skill of someone who'd spent years being overlooked. She saw how the Arab businessman stood with quiet dignity, how his eyes held a kind of patient sadness, how no one seemed willing to bridge the small distance to where he stood. She thought of her grandmother, who'd cleaned these same floors 30 years ago, who'd taught Emerald that a person's worth had nothing to do with the languages they spoke, or the clothes they wore, or the color of their skin, everything to do with the size of their heart. Emerald finished polishing the desk, set down her cloth, and walked to the beverage station. She prepared a cup of traditional Arabic coffee, kahwa, that the hotel kept for international guests. She'd learned to recognize it from a Saudi family who'd stayed last month, who'd taught her the proper way to serve it with dates on the side. She approached Rashid, the delicate cup balanced perfectly on its saucer. "Sir, would you care for some coffee?" Her voice was soft, respectful. "I thought you might prefer something familiar." Rashid turned, surprise flickering across his weathered face. He looked at the cup, at the cardamom-scented kahwa, at the dates arranged thoughtfully beside it, and something shifted in his expression. His eyes grew bright. "You know what this is?" "Yes, sir. A guest taught me. She said, it's about more than coffee. It's about hospitality, about seeing people." Rashid accepted the cup with both hands, a gesture of deep respect in his culture. "What is your name?" "Emerald Castellanos, sir." "Emerald," he repeated it carefully, honoring each syllable. "Do you know what this gesture means to me? In my culture, offering coffee to a stranger is sacred. It says, you are welcome here, you matter." Behind them, conversations continued without pause. No one noticed the quiet exchange between the billionaire and the cleaning woman. No one except Graham Whitmore, Meridian's CEO, who'd been watching from across the room. What the room didn't know, what Emerald herself didn't know, was that Rashid had been testing something tonight. He'd deliberately arrived in traditional dress, had deliberately waited to see who would approach him first, who would see past appearances to the person beneath. He'd made this same test in a dozen cities, and it always revealed the same truth. Most people failed to see what mattered.
And Graham Whitmore was watching because he'd already decided not to pursue the partnership with Al-Zarani Enterprises. His board had expressed concerns about cultural complications, a polite way of saying they weren't comfortable working with Arab investors. Graham had been about to deliver that news, privately relieved to avoid what he'd convinced himself would be a difficult collaboration. But now he watched a young cleaning woman do what his entire executive team had failed to do: see a human being. Rashid spoke quietly to Emerald. "Tell me, why did you do this? You could have stayed at your desk. No one expects this from you." Emerald's eyes glistened. "My grandmother raised me, sir. She worked as a cleaner her whole life. She always said that our job wasn't really about making things shine. It was about making people feel seen. She'd notice when guests were sad or lonely or scared. She'd leave little notes or flowers or just a smile that said, 'You matter.' She passed away last year, but I hear her voice every day, reminding me that kindness costs nothing and changes everything." Rashid set down his cup gently. "Your grandmother was a wise woman, wiser than most people in this room." What Rashid didn't say, what he'd never told anyone, was that his own daughter had recently taken her life after years of battling depression that stemmed partly from experiencing discrimination during her studies in London. He'd been drowning in his grief, questioning everything, wondering if bridging cultures was even possible anymore. Tonight had felt like confirmation that the distance was too great. Until this moment. Graham Whitmore made a decision that would later strike him as either the bravest or most foolish of his career. He crossed the room, his heart hammering.
"Mr. Al-Zarani, I apologize for the inexcusable rudeness you've experienced here tonight. I'd be honored if you'd join me for a conversation about our potential partnership, and if you'd allow me to learn from your perspective." He turned to Emerald. "And Ms. Castellanos, I'd appreciate if you could join us as well. I have a feeling you understand something about business that most of us have forgotten." The reception continued around them, but something had fundamentally shifted. In that crystalline moment, three people from vastly different worlds recognized each other as human, not as positions or titles or stereotypes, but as souls carrying stories of loss and hope and the desperate desire to connect. Later, as Emerald returned to her desk, she touched the small pendant around her neck, her grandmother's, and whispered, "I heard you, Abuela. I heard you." Rashid stood looking out the window at the city lights, the coffee cup still warm in his hands. For the first time in months, he felt his daughter's memory settle into something like peace. She would have loved Emerald, he thought, would have recognized the same fierce, quiet kindness. Graham sat in his office, already composing an email to his board. He didn't know if they'd understand, but he suddenly didn't care. Some things mattered more than comfort. Some bridges needed building, regardless of the risk. The moral woven itself through every exchange, that we choose in each moment whether to see people or look past them. That kindness isn't about grand gestures, it's about the small, sacred act of treating every human being as if they matter, because they do. That sometimes the most important business deals aren't about money at all, but about deciding what kind of world we want to create. Because at the end of every day, we're all just people hoping someone will see us, truly see us, and say through word or deed, "You belong here. You matter. Welcome." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.